You know, the price you pay at the gas pump isn't just about simple supply and demand. It's actually dictated by a century-old battle for control over the world's most critical resource. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating geopolitical analysis about the United Arab Emirates and their reported withdrawal from OPEC. We're going way beyond the headlines here, because according to our source material, there's a much deeper story at play, one involving the hidden influence of US big oil. It's a massive puzzle of alliances, history, and economics that literally impacts global markets and everyday consumers. So let's dive right in and break it all down.
To truly understand the gravity of this move, our source analysis starts with one raw number: 3 million. That is how many barrels of oil the United Arab Emirates produces every single day. Just in isolation, that's a staggering figure, right? It represents an enormous amount of wealth and energy generation.
But, perspective is absolutely everything in global economics. The global economy consumes roughly 100 million barrels of oil daily. So despite that massive 3 million barrel output, the UAE actually only accounts for a mere 3% of total worldwide production.
Which brings us to the central mystery of our explainer. If their output is just a drop in the bucket compared to heavy hitters like Saudi Arabia or Russia, why exactly is the UAE's specific exit from OPEC sending such shockwaves through the geopolitical landscape? Well, according to the analysis, the answer lies in Washington. The source notes it's almost certain the US was consulted before this decision was ever made public. Donald Trump even came out and publicly praised the move, calling it a great decision that benefits the United States. And over across the pond, the British press, including outlets like The Guardian, they characterized the withdrawal as a direct political victory for Trump and the US. Now, this praise isn't super surprising when you look at the UAE's broader geopolitical alignment. They're actually one of the closest US allies, described by the source as a regional proxy in the Persian Gulf. A prime example of this tight alignment was the 2020 Abraham Accords, where the US successfully pressured the UAE to normalize diplomatic relations with Israel. That dynamic is crucial, especially when you contrast it with Saudi Arabia, a country that historically resisted that exact same diplomatic pressure from Washington.
But to fully grasp why the US government would actively want a close ally like the UAE to just up and abandon OPEC, the source argues we've got to step back. We need to leave the present day for just a second and look at the absolute foundation of the global oil industry.
The text actually traces this history all the way back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Back then, the industry was completely dominated by John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil. It was an absolute monopoly, literally reigning as one of the most powerful corporations on Earth. Now, while Standard Oil was eventually broken up in the 1910s during the progressive antitrust era, the source points out something really interesting. Over the past century, through an endless series of mergers and acquisitions, a new corporate cartel essentially re-emerged from those fragmented pieces. You see, in the first half of the 20th century, the global market was heavily controlled by a group of US and UK corporations, famously dubbed the Seven Sisters. And over the decades, those historical monopolies consolidated right back into the massive modern supermajors. We're talking about your Exxon Mobils, your BPs, Shells, and Chevrons. The names changed, sure, but the concentration of market influence, that remained incredibly tight.
So, for decades, those Western corporations pretty much held all the cards. But the analysis highlights a massive turning point: the creation of OPEC. And this was formulated as a direct counterweight to all that Western corporate dominance.
Founded in 1960, right during a huge wave of global anti-colonial movements, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries was a totally radical shift. A lot of newly independent nations had discovered these massive oil reserves within their borders. So OPEC was explicitly designed to allow these global South nations to actually control their own natural resources, rather than just sitting back and watching the profits flow out to London or New York.
Fast forward to today, and that organization has expanded into what's known as OPEC+. By bringing in heavy hitters like Russia, which, by the way, is the number 3 oil producer on Earth, along with other nations, OPEC+ effectively controls about half of all global oil production. I mean, 50%. That is an astonishing amount of leverage over the global economy.
Now, the source also details the actual makeup of this modern coalition. You got Saudi Arabia sitting as the largest internal producer, leading a pretty diverse group of nations from Iraq and Kuwait to Nigeria and Algeria. Interestingly, the analysis notes that Western sanctions have prevented countries like Iran, Venezuela, and Libya from fully integrating into the modern structure, which kind of slightly fractures their collective power. But even so, the sheer volume of resources under the OPEC+ umbrella represents a massive direct challenge to the old corporate order.
And that brings us to the core conflict. The analysis frames this entire geopolitical struggle not just as a fight over barrels of oil, but as a battle between two vastly different economic models, just completely competing for control. On one side, the analysis frames big oil as corporate-owned entities driven by shareholder returns, super focused on maximizing profit for Western markets. On the flip side, it characterizes OPEC state-owned companies quite differently, arguing their revenues are actually utilized by these governments to fund social programs and fuel independent economic development for their populations. So it's really a fundamental clash of economic philosophy playing out right there on a global scale.
Understanding that clash brings us right back to the present day. It perfectly explains exactly why the US government would actively encourage a country like the UAE to abandon OPEC, because ultimately, it comes down to weakening a strategic adversary.
You see, OPEC's true power is actually incredibly straightforward: collective bargaining. By acting as a unified front, member states can collectively assess the market and basically tweak production to dictate global prices. They can decrease production to drive prices up if they fall too low, or they can increase production to cool things down. It's a massive group effort.
But here's the crucial point the source makes. The US government isn't inherently opposed to economic cartels. What it opposes is a cartel controlled by global South nations. The analysis posits that the US wants its own corporations, those super majors we talked about, to be the ones pulling the strings. So, every single time a country like the UAE leaves OPEC, that collective bargaining power fractures just a little bit more, handing a distinct advantage right back to big oil.
So, as the US continues to encourage these fractures within OPEC, we are left with a pretty massive question. If this collective of global South nations loses its grip, who will ultimately inherit total control over the world's most critical energy resource? And maybe more importantly, what will that mean for the prices we pay every single day? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helps clear up some of those deep political currents running beneath the surface of the global oil market. Catch you next time.